If your own family only calls you when they need something, and never just to see how you're doing, then I need you to stay with me all the way to the end of this one. Because there was a woman who lived that for 30 years before she learned that one small word could give her back her whole life, and it cost her $4,000 a year not to say it. The phone was buzzing on the nightstand. It was a Sunday night, and Carolyn already knew before she even reached for it who it was and what it was about. She knew by the hour. Family didn't call her at 9 on a Sunday to talk. They called at 9 on a Sunday because rent was due Monday, and somebody had come up short again. Her hand went out for the phone the way it had gone out 10,000 times, automatic, already tired, already saying yes before her mouth did. Carolyn was 58 years old. She worked the fitting rooms at a department store on Market Street in Philadelphia, straightening the clothes, women left inside out on the hooks, counting the tags, handing out the little plastic numbers, saying, "You look nice in that," to strangers all day long. She'd done it 11 years. Before that, it was other stores, other counters. She was the steady one. In the family where everybody's ground was always shaking, Carolyn had a job, Carolyn had a checking account, Carolyn paid her light bill on time. And so Carolyn was the bank. Her days were on her feet. 8 hours in a little carpeted room with mirrors on every wall, so she couldn't get away from her own reflection if she tried. A heavy-set woman in a store vest with tired eyes, bending and hanging and bending and hanging. She was kind to the girls who came out of the stalls near tears because nothing fit right. She'd say, "The light in here is terrible, honey. That looks good on you." And mean it, because Carolyn knew how it felt to be hard on yourself in a mirror. She took the bus home to a row house in Nicetown that she kept clean and quiet, and most nights she ate standing up at the counter, and most nights the phone rang before she finished. And it was never just to say hello. She was 58, and she could not remember the last time somebody in her family had called her to ask how Carolyn was doing. Here is the thing that ran under her whole life, and it's the thing this story is really about. Carolyn believed, all the way down in her bones, that a good woman does not tell her family no. That saying no was the same as saying, "I don't love you." She had learned it young, in a house on the north side, where her own mother gave and gave until there was nothing, and called it being a Christian woman, and Carolyn grew up believing that love was measured in what you handed over. To keep something back when your people were in need, that was selfishness, that was hardness, that was not who her mother raised her to be. So she answered the phone. It was her brother Reggie, 49 and always one bad week from the edge, and he needed $200, and he was so sorry he'd pay her back Friday, and Carolyn said the thing she always said, "How much you need, baby? Don't worry about it. I want to talk to you a second, whoever's listening, because I know some of you are the bank too. You're the strong one, the one everybody leans on, and you're so tired you could lie down on the floor. This channel is for you, and you are not hard, and you're not selfish for being tired. Now let me show you what all that yes was really costing Carolyn, because she didn't see it herself until it was almost too late. She kept a little notebook, a dollar store spiral notebook she'd bought herself, and in it, for years, she'd written down every dollar she loaned out. Reggie, $200. Andre, her son, $150 for the phone bill. Her cousin Dedra, $80 for the kids' school shoes. She wrote it all down with the date, and she'd made columns, one for what went out and one for what came back. And if you flipped through that notebook, the going out column was full, page after page after page, and the coming back column was empty. Just white, years of white. She told herself she kept the book so people could pay her back. But nobody ever looked at it but her. Late at night, and the truth was, she kept it because it was the only place her giving was ever written down, the only proof that she had been carrying all these people on her back the whole time. It was the closest thing she had to somebody saying thank you. Then came the fall that broke it open. Carolyn had a dream, if you could even call it that, a small one. She wanted to get her own teeth fixed. She'd cracked a back molar 2 years before, and it had gone bad. And she'd been chewing on one side of her mouth for so long, her jaw ached all the time. And the dentist said it was going to run about $4,000 for what all she needed. And Carolyn had been trying for 2 years to save it up. Every time she got close, the phone rang. Reggie, Andre, Deidre, the car, the rent, the lights, the baby needed diapers. And every time, Carolyn opened the notebook, wrote the amount and let her own mouth keep hurting. 2 years. She never once got past about $600 before it was gone. And that fall her son Andre called and he needed $300, and Carolyn had $400 put back toward her tooth. And she sat on the edge of her bed with the phone in her hand and her jaw throbbing, and she said yes. Of course she said yes. And after she hung up, she sat there and put her hand against her own aching face, and she understood something that made her feel sick. She was going to have this bad tooth until she died. Not because she couldn't afford to fix it, because she would never, not once, put her own mouth ahead of somebody else's emergency. There would always be an emergency. She would be in the ground with this tooth. She didn't cry. She just sat there holding her own face in the dark, and the radiator was clanking the way it did. And she thought, is this it? Is this the whole rest of it? And she still didn't know, sitting there, that the hardest part wasn't the money at all. It was a word she didn't know how to say. There was a woman at the store named Miss Pearl, 68 years old, and still coming in to fold the returns. Been at that store 30 years, a mother in her church, one of those old women who don't say much but see everything. She'd heard Carolyn on the phone in the break room more than once. She'd seen the notebook. One afternoon they were both at the return table, and Carolyn's phone had just lit up with Reggie's name, and Carolyn had stepped out and come back $300 lighter, and trying not to let it show. And Miss Pearl, folding a stack of jeans, not even looking up, said it. She said, "You ain't a mean woman, Carolyn. You just never learned the word yet. That's all no is. It's a word. You practice it like anything else." And then she said the part that stuck. She said, "The book says love your neighbor as yourself. As yourself, baby." Most of us been skipping them last 2 words our whole life. That was all. She stacked the jeans and carried them off to the floor. And Carolyn stood at that return table with her hands full of somebody's returned blouse and could not move. As yourself. She'd heard that verse 1,000 times in 1,000 Sundays and never once heard those last 2 words. Her hands were cold. The store music was playing something with no words. She folded the same blouse 3 times. She rode the bus home that night, the 23 up Germantown Avenue, and she didn't hear a thing. A young mother across from her was telling her friend how her sister always hit her up on payday, always, and the friend just shook her head. And Carolyn watched them and thought about a word she didn't know how to say. Her jaw ached the whole ride. When she got off, the corner store's light was flickering, and she stood under it longer than she needed to, and she didn't know why. She lay awake that morning behind the blinds with those 2 words going around and around. As yourself. She thought about her mother, dead 9 years now, who'd given away everything she ever had and died with a purse full of other people's IOUs and not enough to bury herself proper, so that Carolyn had to cover it. And the family had stood at that graveside calling her mother a saint. A saint. Carolyn had believed it her whole life. Lying there that morning, for the very first time, a small, terrible thought came to her that she couldn't push all the way back down. Her mother hadn't been a saint. Her mother had been afraid, same as Carolyn, afraid of the word, and it had cost her everything, and she'd handed that same fear down to her daughter wrapped up in a Bible verse. Carolyn didn't want to think it, but she didn't unthink it either. That evening she got in the house and did what she always did. Her phone buzzed, Deidre this time, warming up, just talking. But Carolyn could hear the ask coming the way you hear thunder before the rain. And Carolyn opened her mouth to say how much you need, and nothing came out. She just couldn't. She said she'd have to call Deidre back. She was walking in the door, and she hung up, and she stood in her kitchen with her heart going like she'd run up the stairs. She'd never done that before. She felt like she'd committed a crime. Here's what nobody tells you. You don't decide to change. Your mouth just closes over the old word one time before your mind gives it permission, and then you're standing there shaking, wondering who you even are. She found her little notebook on the counter the next morning, and she didn't remember taking it out. She stood there with her coffee, and she opened it to a fresh page, past all those years of white in the paid-back column, and she didn't write an amount. She wrote one word. She wrote no, just to see it, just to look at it. And then she felt foolish and closed the book. And then she opened it and looked at it again. The next time the phone rang with a hand out on the other end, it was Reggie. And it wasn't even a real emergency. It was a want dressed up as a need. And Carolyn held the phone, and she looked at that word in the notebook on her counter, and she said it. She said, "I can't this time, Reggie." And the silence on the other end was so loud, it scared her. He got short with her. He said, "Since when?" He said he thought they were family. He said some things that were meant to cut and cut deep, and Carolyn's hand was shaking, but she did not open her checkbook, and she got off the phone and sat down hard in the kitchen chair. It did not feel good. I won't lie to you. It felt terrible. It felt like she'd become her worst idea of herself. Hard and selfish. The exact woman her mother had raised her not to be. Half of her wanted to call Reggie right back and send double to make up for it. She almost did. She sat there in the kitchen with the phone in her hand for a long time. She didn't call him back. And then, because this is real life and not a fairy tale, she slipped. 2 weeks later, Deidre called crying about the kids, and something in it hooked Carolyn under the ribs, the way it always had. And before she knew it, she'd sent $250 and felt that old warm rush of being the good one, the one who came through. It wasn't until the next morning, coffee going cold in her hand, that she saw it plain. She'd done it again. Not because Deidre had no other way, because Carolyn couldn't stand the feeling of the closed door. She sat there ashamed, but it was a different kind of ashamed than before. Before, she'd been ashamed when she said no. Now, for the first time in her life, she was ashamed when she said yes to the wrong thing. Something had turned. She just wasn't all the way through it yet. The next time she held the line, and the time after that, not cruel, just steady. And then Friday came, and something happened that had never happened in 30 years of that notebook. There was still money in her account. The $200 she'd have sent Reggie was just sitting there. And it wasn't blood money, and the sky hadn't fallen, and Reggie, it turned out, had found the money somewhere else, the way people do, the way they always could have. Carolyn looked at that $200 and she understood, standing at the little branch on Broad Street, that every dollar she'd ever given wasn't love. Some of it was, but most of it was fear. Fear of being the one who said no, fear of being called hard. She'd been paying $400 a month sometimes to not have to feel like the bad guy. She started saying it more, not cruel, never cruel. She still helped Andre when it was real, when it was a true emergency, and she helped Deidre with the kids when it counted. But the wants, the Sunday night wants, the I'll pay you back Fridays that never came. She learned to say I can't this time, and she learned to say it without a speech and without an apology. And every time she said it, a little of her own life came back to her, like blood coming back to a hand you'd been sleeping on. Here's what she stopped believing, and if it's yours too, take it tonight. Saying no to somebody is not the same as not loving them. Love your neighbor as yourself. There were always 2 words at the end of that, and they were hers to keep. By the next fall, 1 year from that night, she sat holding her own aching jaw. Carolyn added up what she hadn't given away. $4,000. Almost to the dollar, the exact number the dentist had named 2 years before. She sat with her little notebook, and she almost laughed. Because there it was, The money had always been there. It had just always had somebody else's name on it before she could reach it. She flipped back through all those years of pages, the going out column full and the coming back column empty, page after page of white, and she didn't feel bitter looking at it. She felt something more like grief, and then something more like mercy, for the woman she'd been, who thought that was the only way to be loved. She closed the book. She didn't throw it away. Some things you keep so you don't forget how far you came. She made the dentist appointment, and I want to tell you about the morning she went, because that's the part that tells you she'd really changed. She didn't cancel it when Deidre called that same week needing something. She didn't move it. She got on the bus and she went, and she sat in that chair and she got her own mouth fixed, for the first time in her life putting her own self at the front of the line. And when the numbing wore off and her jaw didn't throb for the first time in 2 years, she sat on a bench outside on Market Street and cried, right there in front of strangers, not because it hurt, but because it didn't anymore. 2 years she'd carried that pain because she couldn't say one word. She ran her tongue over the smooth, new place in her mouth and thought all it ever cost was the word. That was the whole price, just the word. There was a young woman named Nia who came to work in the fitting rooms that year. 27, a baby at home, and Carolyn watched her step out to take a call one day and come back quiet and tight around the eyes. And Carolyn saw the little notebook Nia kept in her apron, and she knew. Lord, she knew exactly what was written in it and what wasn't. She saw herself in that girl so clear it caught in her throat, the exact same worn-down yes, the exact same badge she wore of being the strong one who never says no, the same one Carolyn had worn until it near about buried her. She almost let it be. It wasn't her place. But she thought about Miss Pearl at the return table, retired now, how she'd never preached, just said her little piece and carried her jeans off to the floor. Carolyn was folding a stack of returns next to Nia, and she said it easy, not looking up, the way it had been said to her. She said, "You ain't a mean woman, baby. You just never learned the word yet. No is just a word. You practice it like anything else." And then she said, "Love your neighbor as yourself, as yourself. Don't skip them last 2 words like I did for 30 years. Nia kind of laughed. Then she got real quiet, and Carolyn watched it land on her the same way it had landed on Carolyn at that return table a year before, and she didn't say anything else. She just kept folding. But she saw that girl slip her little notebook back in her apron and stand there thinking, and Carolyn knew she'd handed her something worth more than any $200 she'd ever loaned and never gotten back. Before you go tonight, do this for me. Comment down below with the words, "I said it," and tell me one thing you finally said no to, or one thing you're getting ready to. I read every single one, and I promise you there is a whole room full of tired women in these comments who needed to know they're not alone and they're not hard. And send this to the strong one in your family. She's carried everybody long enough. She needs to hear it. If you're new here, this is a place for the women who hold everybody up and forget they're allowed to set something down. Subscribe, tap the bell, and let the next story come find you when you need it most. And if you want to take the first step today, there's a free app that will help you get a little order to it all. Quiet, just for you. The link is down in the comments. Now go on and rest, you hear. You are allowed to say no, love your neighbor, and baby, love yourself too. That part was always yours.